smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
This could use a brand new coat. That's not allowed, I'd warn you, don't. That guy is crapping on the ground. Hey, it happens. Wait, how's that even allowed? Because you're living in a clown world, a cool to pull your pants on down world. There's only one you can paint brown world. You'll never guess which one in clown world. The cost of rent is getting dear. We should build our new neighborhood here. Zoning forbids new housing builds. We were actually just gonna throw up some tents and, do some heroin. Well, that's acceptable in clown world. Hey, can't let children walk downtown world. They're playing hopscotch, look around world. They're avoiding needles. Oh, it's okay in clown world. He saved that disabled lady. Risked his life to save 2 babies. And to his valor we're in debt. Wait, have you had your booster yet? Well, I've had COVID and I had an adverse. Looking for a new job in clown world. Risk your life so they don't drown world. A down is up and up is down world. Fired is dangerous but from clown world. Oh, we're all living in a clown world. A common sense cannot be found world. Oh, you can paint the sidewalk brown world. We're living in a clown world. Yes, we're all living in a clown world.
That's from the fertile mind of Remy over at Reason.com. Love the Remy parody songs. They're so good. So well written and performed. Part of Clown World.
Yeah.
Perfect intro for our next topic and our next guest. The Fed Reserve, the bank, is the bank that's charged with combating inflation and sticking a soft landing to make sure we don't go in recession. And that bank, if it were a private bank, would be insolvent. Clown World. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by Judge Glock, contributing editor at City Journal, author of The Dead Pledge, The Origins of the Mortgage Market and Federal Bailouts, 1913 to 1939. Judge Glock, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
And so this clown world where the Fed is going to save the world's largest economy from itself, how exactly is it going when we're asking ourselves questions like, is the creation of 517,000 new jobs in January, is that good news or bad news? We don't know.
Well, on its own, that's good news. But of course, as your listeners probably know, a lot of how the markets react and how other people react depends on how the Fed reads that news. And if the Fed reads that news as the economy is going too hot or that there's still inflationary pressures, that could therefore, ironically, be bad news. And they could tamp the brakes down more and try to fight inflation more with higher interest rates. But so far, at least, they've had some success reducing inflation. But as I described in the piece, that also has a lot of costs for the Federal Reserve itself.
Well, we talked about this a little bit last week with our friend Alex Pollock, as a former banker and as well as government regulator. And he basically is just detailing, as you did in your piece, somewhat the precarious financial condition the Fed itself is in. Now, it doesn't matter much to the Fed because they can print money, but it does matter to the larger economy that is so dependent on Fed policy.
Absolutely. And so one, as your previous guest mentioned, that it doesn't seem to have a big effect on the Federal Reserve itself, even if it's quote-unquote losing money, and it is every month. It's paying more money out than it's taking in. There are other costs. Now, one is that the taxpayer doesn't get the Fed income for a long time, the Federal Reserve was giving up to $100 billion a year to the U.S. Treasury. That was a nice pick-me-up for the U.S. Congress that didn't have to tax that money from the taxpayers. Now that is gone. The Fed is losing money and won't be giving money to the taxpayers for quite a while, maybe for another decade or so. So the other problem, of course, though, is that the high inflation and high interest rates are both devastating a lot of economic activity in America. It's driving wages down. It's making businesses that have to raise money for long terms very difficult for them to raise those funds. And there's no sign that that's going to stop anytime in the near future.
But Biden keeps saying wages are up. Things are looking good. So is that just another Biden lie?
Well, it's wages are up if you're just looking at your nominal wages. If you're looking at the number of just the pure numbers on your paycheck, yeah, those numbers have gone up over the past year and a half or so. The problem is inflation has gone up even more. So depending on how you look at, for a while, Americans' real wages were down by about 3% over a year, about the same amount they were down actually in the Great Recession of 2008. Inflation has dipped a little bit since then, and wages have continued to go up. So now it's about breaking even. But still, anyone who claims that by looking at just the raw numbers that wages are going up quickly is definitely misleading you. If anything, they're going down.
You've got some of the big shooters on Wall Street from Morgan Stanley and Goldman saying, well, we good likelihood, still maybe an even money bet that we'll be in recession before the year's end, but good likelihood that we will not be in Q1 or Q2. Do you share that short-term optimism?
Well, it will be almost 100% dependent on what the Federal Reserve does. Whether or not America enters or exits or avoids a recession is pretty much up to the Federal Reserve. Now, they are going to follow the signs, hopefully, whether that means the amount of how fast wages are going up, how fast prices are going up, how robust the economy looks. But it seems that many people at the Federal Reserve understand that they have to squelch inflation now. Otherwise, you could face something like we saw in the 1970s, which is over a decade plus of inflation rates of 5 to 10 to 12%. And nobody wants that. So the Federal Reserve is basically going to keep looking at those numbers, and if they feel that inflation is not coming down fast enough, and it looks like, although it's coming down, it's not coming down very fast, that they're going to have to keep tamping on the brakes and increasing interest rates, and that's going to make a recession more likely.
Is there anything that you see, in addition to persistent inflation, anything you see in the horizon with all this manipulation of the economy by these central bankers in particular? Any sort of contagion you see on the horizon that people aren't talking about that they should be cognizant of in the labor market or the housing market or debt markets?
Well, we do face the real danger that we're going to have another sad effect of the 1970s, which was the stop-go economy, which is that inflation ramped up, the Fed hit the brakes very hard, increased interest rates, the economy fell into recession, and then the Fed went too fast in the other direction and dropped rates too quickly, leading to inflation very rapidly again. And that kind of happened over and over again in that time. And there seems to be some danger of that, where the Fed could allow inflation to explode during the pandemic, maybe tamp it down now. It's not operating according to any real consistent rule that we can see, and that's a real danger right now. What you want the Federal Reserve to do is operate under a consistent rule where everyone knows what to expect. They know what's going to happen month to month, and they know what the sort of interest rates are going to be dependent on what inflation in the economy looks like. Now we're all kind of stuck reading tea leaves and seeing what Jerome Powell says month to month about how the inflation is looking, and that's a real danger. The other danger, of course, is that go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Now, what's the other danger?
Well, the other danger, of course, is that the Federal Reserve is getting involved in a lot more things it didn't used to be involved in. Now, before, in the 1970s, it was basically just worry about the economy and inflation. Those are pretty much its only two jobs. And now it's getting involved in things like, well, we have to worry about climate change. Now we have to worry about inequity and inequality in the American system. And now we're also they're getting more and more involved in different markets. Before, they used to just be buying U.S. Treasury bonds. And now, during the pandemic, they started buying corporate debts. They started buying junk bonds. They started buying municipal bonds. And that's a real danger to the sort of stability of the economy, too, and that you don't want a politicized government institution deciding sort of where credit goes and doesn't go. And that's something that they're getting increasingly involved in, which is a real danger.
Well, if the Fed doesn't buy Illinois bonds, who will? That's the conundrum. So we'll be excited to see which mistakes we choose to repeat. Judge Glock, contributing editor, City Journal, author of The Dead Pledge, The Origins of the Mortgage Market and Federal Bailouts, 1913 to 1939. Judge Glock, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Hi, it's Amy. And by now you've all heard me talk about MyPillow. And now Mike Lindell has done it again with the MyPillow My Slippers. It took him 2 years to develop the perfect slipper designed to wear indoors or outdoors all day long. These slippers are made with MyPillow foam and impact gel to help prevent fatigue, and the outside is made with quality leather suede.